All right, so we're going to begin now. Um, Welcome, first of all, to our Saturday meditations, which happen every Saturday on YouTube Live. And the second Saturday of each month, we are in person at the Lakewood Public Library in Detroit and on YouTube Live. So please join us. There will be a break in the summer, but I'll talk more about that when we get closer to that date. So we want to begin always with our bodhicitta motivation. So bodhicitta is a Sanskrit word. Bodhi means awakened or enlightened, and citta means the mind and heart together. So the literal translation is enlightened mind, heart. But the meaning is the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So sentient means what? Sentient means with consciousness. So that means human beings, animals, and beings in other realms that we can't see at the moment. But we're thinking about all beings. We are considering their suffering and generating compassion, first of all, towards them, which is essentially the wish that others be free from suffering, right? So, in that compassion, it's wonderful and it's something we should definitely generate and practice as much as we possibly can. But also, it's mixed with, in order for it to become bodhicitta, it is mixed with this wisdom that understands the cause of suffering is this fundamental ignorance that can be removed by attaining enlightenment. So this is the process. So this is why we want so much to attain enlightenment, so we can help them also attain enlightenment and remove their own suffering. So this is where this is coming into play. So if this is a concept that is a little bit too out of the ordinary for you, that's totally fine. You know, if you can just at least think, may the time that we're spending together this morning benefit not only myself, but other beings as well. So please take a moment to do that before we start. I'm going to see. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, you're watching on YouTube and you have some questions, please put it in the chat and I will do my best to answer. So I'll wait a moment for you to consider that and to write out your question. And if you don't have a question, that's also fine. I know what I want to talk about. So, um, but I'm so happy to answer your questions, actually. So I'll wait. Insamda Samgarab Shiri Sandam Garachabani Shunam Susulaknatatin Kacharamanam so one day. Wamishagi, keep Ojane, just some Sagi again. And some sugar no suit as a bath. So animation. Okay. All right. So I don't see any questions there. If anything comes up, even during the talk or the meditation instruction, please feel free to add a question or a comment in the chat. As I said, I'm right there looking at it. So um, don't be shy. Okay. All right. So today I want to discuss suffering. What do we do when we suffer? How do we handle suffering as practitioners? Okay. Um, Unfortunately, um, just by virtue of the fact that we are not enlightened yet, just by virtue of the fact that we're not enlightened, we are going to face various types of suffering. Yeah. We have physical suffering, so sickness, various things that might be wrong with our body, um, this kind of thing, getting into an accident, having a disease, having chronic pain, this kind of stuff, right? Physical suffering, we're all familiar with that. And we have mental, emotional situational, if you will, kinds of suffering too, right? Which can be, in some sense, worse than physical suffering. Not maybe not worse, but harder to handle and maybe more constant, unless you have chronic pain, which is constant. So those are things like, depression, anxiety, relationship problems, loneliness, the list is very long. I'm sure you're all familiar with grief, right? I'm sure you're all familiar with, sadly, I'm sure you're all familiar with all kinds of suffering, right? So, as practitioners, Buddhist practitioners, what do we do when we suffer? And what do we do when the suffering just piles one on top of the other, right? Say we have chronic pain, and then we get a diagnosis of cancer, and then our spouse divorces us, this kind of like piling on kind of suffering. Yeah. So, to talk about that, I want to first talk about how we are handling the smaller, one at a time kind of sufferings that we might experience on a regular basis, right? Or just in our day-to-day life. So let's take pain. Let's, to make it easy, let's take temporary pain. Yeah. Let's say that we're cooking and we burn our hand by taking something out of the oven. Okay. Very painful, but temporary. Yeah. What do we do with that suffering? What can we do? What skillful thing can we do with that? Um, First of all, of course, we want to take care of it. We don't want to just sit around looking at the burn, of course. Naturally, we're going to put it under cold water and do whatever else is necessary to help us heal that burn. But other things that we can do as practitioner is to think about others in that moment. And it might sound impossible, like especially right on the spot when we're first experiencing that burn. Um, but it is possible with practice. So we can think very simply, may this pain take away the pain of all beings. Does that sound stupid? Maybe that sounds a little stupid. Maybe it doesn't sound stupid per se. Maybe it sounds, what's the word? I'm thinking maybe like trite or um, kind of airy fairy or sort of not realistic. But no, it's such a skillful practice. Okay, and here's why. When we suffer, whether it's small suffering or big suffering or sufferings piling on top of the one another, uh, we tend to focus even more on ourselves, and we tend to kind of go inwards, crawl into our shell, and isolate ourselves and or feel isolated, like we're the only ones going through this. It's just a sort of knee-jerk reaction, a kind of automatic response to pain. Okay. And we can feel, often what we do also is to add mental pain, unnecessarily add suffering on top of the suffering. So for example, let's take this example. So we burn our hand taking food out of the oven, and as we're first we yell, and then we put it under cold water, and then we bandage it up and put medicine on it, etc. Right? And during that time, it depends on you, right? It depends on the person. Not everybody's going to react like this, but I'm just giving this as an example. During that time, we may mentally be thinking like, oh, this is ruining my whole day. Why is this happening? I can't believe I did this again. What is wrong with me? I'm the worst person in the world. Or, you know, why didn't my partner put the what do you call that? Pot holder in the right place, this sort of thing, like we just pile on intellectually or intellectually, mentally, right? Emotionally, really. And we add to that. Why me? Why is this happening? It's just a burn, man, you know? And if we can just see it without, can I say, if we can just see it kind of nakedly, right? Without adding onto it all of this drama, let's say, right? It will make it actually easier to handle, easier to get over, hurt less. I can tell you that from experience, right? Um, but more so if we can think of others in that moment. May this pain take away the pain of all beings. Right away, we move from like this sort of posture to this posture. Yeah. And we are um, opening our heart. We are developing compassion for others right there, right then. Yeah. You can think specifically, like, may the pain of this burn take away the pain of burns of everyone, right? Um, you can, I mean, this kind of, maybe this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but you could think of, the fires, right? These, it's driving me nuts. The kind of, if you think of the big fires that happened in California, I think it was last year, uh, all the animals that got burned alive in that fire, for example, you know, you could think of that. Or you could just think people get burned all the time, you know, and um, the pain of that is very, very intense. So we just think, may this burn take away the pain of burns of all beings. Or you can just think pain in general. May this burn take away the pain of all beings, or may this burn take away the suffering of all beings, no matter what kind. This simple training is so, so, so helpful. It can be hard to remember it, you know, but if you can get into the habit of it, it's extremely helpful. And what it does, one of the things that it does is to give meaning to your suffering, right? Uh, a lot of the times the kind of suffering that we add to our suffering is like looking for meaning, like, why is this happening to me? Why does this always happen? This kind of thing, right? And then, or we might just feel like it has no meaning whatsoever, and I'm just suffering to suffer, and it's horrible. This adds to our suffering. Yeah. So if we're thinking of others, automatically it gives meaning to our suffering because it's called taking it on the path, taking suffering on the path. Yeah. We're using our suffering to practice. We're using our suffering to practice compassion for others. So therefore our suffering has meaning. Yeah. So we're using our suffering to develop compassion. And compassion is really, really essential on this path because it is the root of bodhicitta. Remember at the beginning when I was talking about bodhicitta, right? So bodhicitta begins with compassion. It's not synonymous, but it begins with compassion. Yeah. So we have suffering, just one instance of suffering. We know that it's temporary. Yeah. It could last a few days. We have to keep changing the bandage and keep putting medicine on and checking it and making sure we don't damage it more and so forth, right? But we know eventually that's going to heal and we'll be done with that suffering. Okay. um in that case, in those small cases, we can do potentially a lot of things with that. We can potentially practice in a lot of different ways with that, according to the teachings. But um, it's easier to consider those ways when we have a longer term kind of suffering that we're dealing with. Yeah. So there's like these sort of like short-term sufferings, right? Like I said, like getting a burn, or I don't know, having a temporary fight with our partner who we love, and we will make up, and things will be good with the relationship again, but there's that like temporary suffering. Okay. And then there's like this long-term suffering, right? Or longer term suffering, and sometimes entire life suffering. Okay. For example, like chronic pain. Okay. Um, or uh, we lose a limb and we have to deal with that for the rest of our life. Or we have, some kind of chronic mental illness like depression, or, you know, um, ADHD, or these anxiety, these kind of longer term mental sufferings. Yeah. And then there's the kind of suffering that I started out explaining, which is, suffering upon suffering upon suffering. Lots of things happening at the same time for a long time, right? Um, so for the sorry, speaking of, I'm so uncomfortable. I moved this back cushion and now it's messing it up everything. Okay. Um, so for the longer term suffering, let's say chronic pain, okay. Um, and this is something I am, very familiar with. I have chronic pain in my back that I've had for almost 30 years now. Um, then of course we still use those tools that I discussed with more temporary pain. Yeah. May this pain take away the pain of all beings, or may this back pain take away the back pain of all beings, or take away the back pain of anybody who has back pain, however we feel more connected in practicing that particular aspect, right? But we have time. We have time. Yay, long-term pain. But really, we have time to consider other things, right? We have time to consider to like, in some ways it's a gift, right? Because you have you can practice different things every day, or you can practice the same thing every day and get very good at it because you have this freaking pain every day, right? So other things that you can consider um, are is is karma, the law of cause and effect. Okay, and I have other videos talking about karma on this channel. So if you're interested in that topic, I encourage you to go and look at those videos. You can search the channel for that. Um, it's important to understand in our culture, it has this sort of pop culture understanding of karma, and they use the word karma. And I'm sure anybody on social media will have seen that a million times. Um, People use the word karma incorrectly, as they're really thinking of it as revenge, right? Um, and they take great joy when someone who has done something, in their eyes, when someone who's done something wrong um, receives punishment or suffers in some way, then they are very joyful and say, well, that's karma, kind of thing. It's really a wrong understanding of karma. Yes, the broad definition, the sort of most just simplistic understanding of karma is uh, positive or skillful or virtuous acts of body, speech, and mind result in suffering. And uh, um, I'm sorry, what did I just say? I have ADHD. So, sorry, I meant to say positive acts of body, speech, and mind result in happiness, and negative or unvirtuous or unskillful acts of body, speech, and mind result in suffering. Okay, that's the like really broad stroke when we talk about karma, right? But it's so it's so subtle, and there's so many factors that come into play when we're talking about karma that it becomes extraordinarily complicated, because for one, and again, please refer to those other videos because I don't want to spend the whole time talking about karma. But so if we're thinking in those terms, let's just take back pain, for example, chronic back pain, and we can think in terms of karma. This particular stream of consciousness that happens to currently take this form, at some point in the past, either in this or previous lives, put into motion a chain of events, a chain of action and reaction that resulted in chronic pain, having chronic pain. Okay. In general, usually physical suffering is a result of negative physical acts like violence, sexual misconduct, and things like that. Any negative things we might do with our body. Okay. And in general, uh, other kinds of suffering are from non-physical behaviors. Okay. That's just super generalized. So if we think about karma correctly, in accordance with the teachings, then it actually makes our suffering easier to bear. We have to be careful that we don't fall into self-blame and guilt. Okay. We don't want to hear these teachings and then say, well, it's my own fault. I'm a bad person because I have chronic pain. That is not what it's about. Right. And this is a really tricky thing for Westerners, um, who, you know, grew up in a Judeo-Christian tradition, which, generally comes with a lot of guilt and blame and things like that. Karma needs to be seen in a very matter of fact way, like a natural law, right? Like right now it's raining here, and um, I don't need to get upset about that or feel any type of way about that or feel like that's a moral judgment of some kind. It's just the conditions in nature came together in such a way that it is currently raining. It's not a big deal, right? I might in my own life be unhappy about that because I had plans for a picnic today. That's a different story. But the rain itself there's no judgment on that. And that's the way that we need to see our own pain. It's just conditions came together in a certain way that now water is falling from the sky. And we call that rain. Conditions come together in a certain way that now we have this particular suffering that we're enduring. Okay. And if we see it that way, why am I saying that's easier? It's easier. You have to try it, in a way, you have to just try it and see for yourself. But it's easier because um, it removes that kind of mental, emotional suffering that we have a tendency to add onto our physical suffering or onto whatever kind of suffering that we're going through, right? So, for example, I don't know, we don't have to try to find an answer outside of that, oh, well, this is my karma. And when we say this is my karma, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to get rid of that pain. And it doesn't mean that we should try to create pain to purify our negative karma or anything like that. It just means like we're just seeing things as they really are according to the teachings. You can accept or reject that. That's totally up to you. But I'm giving you this explanation from the Buddhist teaching point of view. Okay. So I think this is my karma. This is my karma. At some point in this or previous lives, this particular stream of consciousness put this into motion by doing something negative, harmful. And now this is happening. you know, it makes it easier to accept. And if we are accepting it in that sense, then it just becomes like another factor. It doesn't become such a big deal in our life, you know? I hope you're understanding this properly because I don't mean to say it's not a big deal to have chronic pain because I can tell you as someone who has experiences it regularly, it is a big deal. Okay. But if we really accept the teachings on the law of cause and effect, then it just becomes another aspect of our life, you know? And we can just be like, okay, well, my karma, you know? I don't need to try to find a reason. I don't need to, you know, wail and, rend my garments, over it, right? That's just how it is. This is the thing. It's raining, you know. I have this pain. Okay. And we have so much opportunity when we have chronic pain to use that to generate compassion for others. We have a burn, this sort of temporary pain. It's just momentary, okay? And we can kind of forget about it. But if we have chronic pain or some kind of other chronic suffering, um, then we have so much opportunity. Oh yeah, I can, make this suffering, take away the suffering of all beings. There's so many people who suffer from chronic pain, you know. May my suffering take away their suffering. And right away s- you have compassion, right? You have this, you're on the same level as other people. You you can include them. You understand automatically that you're not the only one going through this. And that makes it also easier to bear, right? And you think, may all beings, including myself, be free from all suffering. And you're using that, right? Again, taking your suffering on the path, using it. Okay. So, and in a sense, we can even be happy about it, as crazy as that sounds. And I know it sounds cuckoo bananas. Okay. I really do. But why do I say that? Why can we be happy about having chronic pain? Because we know that it is purifying that karma that we created, right, in the past. So there are, if I think it was last week that I talked about purification. So you can again refer to that video if you want to learn more about that. But there's a few ways to kind of get rid of our negative karma. And the most common way is just to go through it, right? Like we just go through it. We have to go through it, and once that pain is done, then that particular karma is done. Yeah, it's over, and we don't ever have to experience that particular karma again. Okay. Um, right. So we just go through it. Another way is to try to fix it in the ordinary ways that our, society or um, religious practices might teach us, like apologizing to others, trying to remedy the situation somehow if we've done something negative. Another teaching is to do like the opposite of whatever it was that we did negatively. So I don't know, let's say that in that example, I was talking about somebody who fished a lot, and they hear the teachings and they become kind of uh, horrified, by that and just all the fish that they killed and the suffering that they caused those fish and so forth. And so they decide to save lives. They decide to save fish, right? Something you can do. Um, by the way, if you that is really common practice is to save lives. But if we're going to do that, we need to be really careful of the environmental impacts of that and not let animals go into the wrong environment and end up messing with the ecosystem. So we want to be careful about that. But like, there's restaurants in the Cleveland area that, it's in, like I used to see even in the grocery store, kind of live lobsters, right? Well, I'm not gonna buy that lobster and let it into Lake Erie, right? The lobster will die. So we need to be careful from that aspect also, that it's the right environment for the animal and that that animal is the right animal for that environment so it doesn't destroy the environment. But anyway, in this area, in the Cleveland area, it's quite difficult to do that. One thing we can do in the summer, not in other seasons, but one thing that we can do is go to a pet store and buy a bunch of crickets and let them go um, in the summertime. In the winter, if you do that, you're just killing the crickets. So you're not really doing any good, probably creating more negative karma accidentally. But I'm laughing because my brother did that when he first became Buddhist. He was so enthusiastic about it, and he didn't think about winter. Anyway, um, so that's something you can do, buy crickets that are sold in pet stores as food for reptiles, typically. So like that's an example. Or if, you have stolen, then, to be generous and to give to others and this kind of really simple one for one kind of thing you can do. But in general, just kind of trying our best to create positive merit or positive karma, right? By training the mind in patience and kindness and compassion and awareness and, watching our words and our actions in our daily life so we can become, you know, better people really and just can really reduce the negative acts of body, speech, and mind and increase the positive acts of body, speech, and mind. And by doing so, we benefit ourselves and others. We create a future for ourselves where we won't suffer or we won't suffer as much. So, I mean, it's kind of selfish in a way, but that is something that we can do. Okay. So we're developing compassion, we're understanding karma. Another thing is, which, well, I'm going to go now to like we're out of time, but I still haven't reached that point that I wanted to reach about the piling on kind of suffering. Just want to see how many. Okay. So, when we're talking about this kind of piling on suffering, where we have chronic pain and we've lost a loved one, and I don't know, we got COVID, whatever, right? Bunch of things going wrong at the same time. And we can really fall into despair in that kind of situation. We can really start to feel like, what is the point of even living? You know, all I'm doing is suffering morning to night. I can't take this anymore. Right? We can start to feel like that. And that's a really, really, really painful place to be. If you are in that place, or if you in the future, experience that kind of thing, then I would really advise you, first of all, to reach out to others and try to get some support, and just be able to talk to somebody on the phone can be so helpful. And if you are not in that place, but you have, friends and family who are in that place, please check on them. It's so important. It means so much. Like even I saw recently that something like even 8 minutes on the phone with a friend can like change everything for you. So, you don't have to spend 3 hours on the phone with somebody, just checking in with them, having a few laughs, just treating them like a human being. Like all of that is just so much more supportive than you can imagine, you know. Um, so if you're that person suffering, reach out for help and be kind to yourself. Um, sometimes we can get very self-critical, right? And we can start to feel like, oh, why am I not stronger? I should be able to handle this, or how did I F up my life so much that I'm in this situation right now? Everything is terrible, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Try not to do that. Okay. Try to be gentle with yourself and kind to yourself and loving to yourself, like you would be with a good friend. It's so important, you know. And then, in that type of situation, we can use all the tools that I just mentioned. May this pain take away the pain of others, using it to develop compassion for others, considering karma, purification, and getting rid of these things and so forth. Excuse me. But another thing that can really help in that situation is to develop renunciation for samsara. Okay, so samsara is a Sanskrit word. Um, it's translated as cyclic existence. So cyclic existence is this round of birth and death and birth and death and birth and death and birth and death that we've been on since beginning this time, according to the teachings. Accept or reject it as you will, but those are the teachings. Okay. So that's samsara. And the problem is that we get very attached to samsara and we get seduced by samsara because sometimes things are really good. Yeah. I had a really close friend. I mean, she's still my friend actually, but she's French. And my first 3-year retreat, we were learning about samsara and everything. And she had a really strong French accent. And if she found something pleasurable, like, I don't know, let's say she was eating a dessert or something like that, and she would go, samsara is so good sometimes. Like that. I love her so much. So, those things happen, right? Of course. And it's nice, I'm not saying we shouldn't want to be happy, yeah, sure, absolutely, but we shouldn't be fooled by that. We shouldn't be tricked. And we are tricked. We're really tricked. Yeah. We like to think of ourselves as like super intelligent, independent beings who could never fall for a scam. Samsara is a scam, man. It's such a scam. And we fall for it over and over and over again. You know, what do I mean? We have this very deep delusion that if only we could get all of our ducks in a row, we would be happy forever. You have this delusion, my friend. You have this delusion. You might think you don't, but examine yourself. You'll see you actually do. Yeah? Well, I'm not having a good time right now, but you know, once I find a partner, everything will be perfect. You know, or, I really hate my job. And, you know, if I could just quit my job and find a really good job, I would be happy all the time and everything would be perfect. Or, I'm really unhappy with my body. And like, if I could just lose some weight, everything would be perfect and my life would be so easy. Whatever, fill in the blanks. Trust me, we do this all the time. Every one of us does this and is not aware of it. Typically, we're not aware we're doing this. Yeah. I wish that it were true. I wish that just getting a new house or a new boyfriend or a new job or a skinnier body or whatever it is would make us happy forever. But it doesn't, it can't, and it won't ever, ever. Okay. How do I know that? I don't, I'm, I don't know all the Dharma. I'm not a good practitioner. I'm average intelligence. Like, how do I know that? Just look at your life, man. Just look at your life. Has that ever, in however many years you are right now, however many years in this life you've been on the planet, has that ever worked? Has getting something that you wanted ever given you lasting happiness? The answer is no, 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 no. It has not. It cannot. If it did, you would be happy right now. If chocolate cake gave you lasting happiness, you would only need to have one bite of chocolate cake and you would always be happy, right? If a relationship gave you lasting happiness, you would need one relationship, and just having that relationship, you would no problems ever. No physical pain, no emotional pain, nothing, right? Doesn't work that way. But we continuously think that it does, that it will. This is why the Buddha's first teaching was there is suffering. Why? Why is he saying that? Yeah. He's not saying that so that we get bummed out and don't want to live life, right? He's just saying, like, man, you got to see what the problem is. Of course, we see these, in that first noble truth, right? There is suffering, there's cause of suffering, there's a cessation of suffering, there's a path that leads to the cessation of suffering, okay? That first noble truth has subsets, okay? And he outlined different types of suffering, right? So there's what they call the suffering of suffering, and that's all that stuff like I just mentioned, yeah? You have burns, you have chronic illness and depression, and then, you know, I don't know, all your money's gone, whatever it is. And then there's suffering of change, which is like pleasant things that we enjoy eventually will disappear. This is just it's because impermanence is the thing. And why I'm frustrated is because I studied this stuff for 30 years, been practicing for, I mean, more than 30 years, 35 years, right? I've been ordained for 30 years. I've been teaching for 20 years, and I still fall for this, and it's very frustrating. So that's why I'm like, oh, why don't you get it already? Yeah. So suffering just because of impermanence, that's it. Yeah. Maybe you really like the springtime, and springtime's going to turn into summer. Maybe you really like summer, whatever it is, you have a relationship, it falls apart. You have a piece of chocolate cake, eventually it's gone, and then it ends up on your body as fat. Yeah. You have, a good friend, and they move to another country and you can't see them or talk to them as much, right? Things change like that. That's one subset of this suffering of change. The other is anything that we find pleasant, if we do it enough, we do it long enough, it turns into suffering. So, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a new example, but I can't think of something. So, let's say you really like, let's say you really like Indian food, yeah? And you're going to have a nice big Indian meal. At some point, you have to stop, right? If you don't stop, that becomes suffering. No matter how beautiful the Indian food is. By the way, if you're in Cleveland, I recommend Jaipur Junction in I think it's in North Royalton on Sprague in York. It's the best Indian restaurant in all of Cleveland. It's so, so good. Anyway, at some point you have to stop, right? Otherwise your stomach starts to hurt and you just get really bloated, like you can't digest anything, like it turns into suffering. This very pleasant thing turns into suffering. You know, you want to go for a hike in the woods because it's so beautiful and now it's springtime and it's very lovely. Let's say somebody comes up behind you with a gun And it's just like, well, you're not allowed to stop walking. It turns into suffering. If you do it long enough, it turns into suffering. Why, Lord Buddha? Why are you going to tell us this stuff? Why are you going to bum us out like this? Right? It's not, it's so that we see how things really are, so we can understand the reality of our existence, the reality of our situation. Yeah. If we can understand that, then we can move more quickly towards freedom from suffering. Okay. By not clinging to these things and expecting them to be permanent and being surprised and hurt and suffering when they disappear, when they change. Buddha is saying, dude, this is how it is. Yeah. And if we are suffering a lot, okay, from this suffering upon suffering situation, then it's really helpful to bring to mind this teaching about the nature of cyclic existence. Yeah. This is the reality of cyclic existence. And if we continue to refuse that truth, if we continue to ignore that truth, run away from that truth, we're just going to suffer more, you know? Like developing renunciation. This is our teacher, uh, Palmo Rybicki, one of our main teachers, said renunciation of samsara or cyclic existence is renouncing the cause of cyclic existence, right? Which is ignorance, fundamental ignorance, Maripa, and negative acts of body, speech, and mind that are the result of that ignorance. Yeah. So when we say we want to develop renunciation for samsara, we're not saying we're not allowed to enjoy anything. We're not saying we're not allowed to try to make our life better, get rid of our pain, or, you know, find a new job or try to find a partner, or any of those things. We're not saying we can't do those things. We're not saying we shouldn't do those things. We're just saying we should have a realistic expectation of those things. Okay? A realistic expectation of those things means we understand the impermanent nature of those things. Means we understand that that cannot bring us lasting happiness. Temporary happiness, absolutely. Lasting happiness, no, no. What brings us lasting happiness then? What brings us lasting happiness is attaining enlightenment, is seeing so clearly, finally, the nature of reality versus our complete distortion, our complete misinterpretation, misperception of reality, misperception of, like, I wish, I wish we could all just like really get this. Yes. That's all cyclic existence is a misperception of reality. Isn't that weird? Isn't that so far out? Like, that's all it is. We're misperceiving. It is not the way that it appears. We are not the way that we appear. Outer phenomena is not the way that it appears. Ultimately, it truly doesn't exist the way that we think it does. Okay. So we're sort of moving into, like, moving from this like basic, fundamental teaching about suffering through to the understanding of emptiness, right? Through to like getting at the root of absolute truth, absolute reality. Okay? So when we're suffering like this, when we're suffering so much, it's such a good opportunity to practice in all kinds of ways. Yeah. To develop compassion for others, to understand the nature of cyclic existence and karma, and to develop renunciation for samsara or cyclic existence. This is samsara. This suffering is samsara. I don't want to suffer like this anymore. So I'm going to practice as much as I possibly can. I'm going to develop compassion as much as I possibly can. I'm going to develop bodhicitta as much as I possibly can so I can be free of this hellhole and help others to be free also. Yeah. That's like so beneficial. That's like the best possible thing we can do with our suffering is that, you know, if everything is going well in our life, okay, we're young and we're beautiful and we're healthy and we have a great relationship and we have money, like that's very seductive. That's like a God realm kind of experience, right? And then we can just feel like, well, I mean, life is great, man. I don't need to think about anybody else. I don't need to develop compassion. I don't need to, think about impermanence and the fact that one day if I don't die first, one day I will be old and my body will hurt and people will stop taking me seriously and my partner will die and I might lose my job right? And so we end up like, we end up like wasting time. We end up not taking the opportunity we have as human beings to walk this path. Um, and we end up sometimes creating a lot more like negative karma and suffering for ourselves in the future because it doesn't occur to us. So we're just doing a lot of machinations, to keep our money and, keep our position and keep our partner and like try to keep all this stuff static and safe, which is impossible actually. I really talked for a long time. I'm sorry about that. We only have a few minutes left, so but anyway, let's do some meditation. Let's do some meditation, okay? And then we'll end. Um, so you want to take the meditation posture first of all. If you're sitting on the floor, or you're sitting on your bed or whatever, just cross your legs in whatever position is comfortable for you. If you're sitting in a chair, just make sure your feet are flat on the floor. The main thing is that your back is straight. Okay. So you put your hands palms down on your knees or palms down one on top of the other in your lap, or with your fingers on top of each other and your thumbs touching like you're holding a goose egg, whichever you prefer. Arms are relaxed. The shoulders are back a little bit. The side up opens up your chest. Because your spine is straight, back of your neck is also straight, chin is tucked in a little bit. Mouth is closed but relaxed, tongue resting on the roof of the mouth, breathing through the nose. The eyes ideally are open, half open, looking down with a relaxed lowered gaze. If that's not comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes and just train over time to meditate with them half open like this. It's quite important. Okay, so we take this posture of the body because it helps the mind in meditation. So let's just get used to that posture for a moment. Okay, now bring your awareness to the sensation of the breath coming in and out of the nose. So that sensation is what we're going to focus on. Try to maintain continuous awareness, sensation of the breath coming in and out of the nose, and just let your thoughts come and go without getting involved in them. Keep your awareness on the breath. Let the thoughts come and go without judgment, without running after them. If you find yourself distracted, simply bring your mind back to the breath. Let's begin that now, please. Now you can begin to count the breaths, counting either every in breath or every out breath for a total of 10 breaths. If you lose count, just bring the mind back. Start again at 1. You get to 10 without losing count. Go back to 1 and start again. So please begin that now. Okay, so we'll end the meditation there. And now we will say the closing prayer. So if you have them, you can bring those out. I will share the screen. So if you don't have them, but you check the description box, you'll see the link to download the prayers. Also, there's a link there for signing up for the newsletter, which I really, really recommend. It's the best way of knowing what's going on, being the first to know what's going on with Songtsen Gampo. If it doesn't work, this link has been really weird. So if it doesn't work for you, please email us and let us know. We're trying to fix it. It works for some people, it doesn't work for other people. I don't really understand what the problem is, but please let us know if it doesn't work and we'll get you on the list. Another way, just give us our email and we'll go into the service and add you ourselves. So I also want to say that we have a new class coming up. You can check it out on our website. Um, it's called Awakening Wisdom, and it is a class that is we'll be studying one of our teachers' books. Tuku Palmo Rybicki wrote this book called Awakening Wisdom. So we'll be studying that text for 10 weeks, non-consecutive weeks, because the summer break comes up in the middle of that. What else? Every Saturday, we have meditation. I mentioned that at the beginning. We also meet for the Buddha sadhana, which is 3 times a month according to the lunar calendar. So check our calendar. We don't always put out a newsletter, so it's always in the newsletter when we do put out a newsletter, but it's always on the site on our calendar, which is under the events tab or upcoming, something like that. You can find our calendar there, and they're all in the calendar. So on weekdays, we do the Buddha sadhana from 7:30 p.m. to 8, and on weekends we do from 11:30 to 12 noon. So there is the Buddha Day tomorrow, so you can join us on Zoom, not on YouTube, but on Zoom. And you'll find the link for that on our website under the practice tab at the top where it says Buddha sadhana. So we hope you can join us tomorrow with the sadhana. What else? Yes, if you could please donate, we would be so grateful. We might suggest $5 to $10 donation for these meditation sessions. Really the best is if you could become a member. We have levels suited to every financial situation, and there's discounts associated with each level also. Or you can just make a one-time donation, or you can donate to our GoFundMe campaign. So, please think about that. It is something that is unfortunately necessary in the world that we live in. Actually, it's always been necessary. Anyway, let's do these prayers. You can join or not. I'm going to share my screen with you in case you don't have that prayer. And we will begin with these prayers for the long life of our teachers, starting with the Dalai Lama, then Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche, then Palmo Rybicki, and General Long Life. These we do just in Tibetan. And then the next page, I'll let you know when we get there, okay? 看瑞瓦为各位新康苏班当地瓦马鲁之文内真人希望真正严肃一撒贝个嘎嘎出全球是我们 Swasti 只每天被看懂样巴鲁和嘎谁真是谁分早晚你这真三那给人不愁在这个为啥给他诉说 pardon me Swifty say like him so to mountain June the sin to say you to Pema so soon another ego boat at the legend and the shade and the gay show. Namago gun simple so on that should do good saving one so on that in a tashing about so on that Namandre wa me pachingi lo. Now, the next page, we do the first prayer once in English, once in Tibetan, the remaining 3 in English, and then we say the 100-syllable mantra. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, in the ocean of cyclic existence, may free all beings. Sunondi tanchesi pani, tone nebe tranon tancheshi, Egana jibanon trupai, sipe sole droa droa sho. May Bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it does not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may it too remain and dispel the miseries of the world. Amen. Ever absorbed in the display of divine forms and primordial awareness, appearance, sound, and perception in the state of divinities, mantras, and Dharmakaya, may I, inseparable from the practice of the profound and secret way yoga, attain within the essence of mind the state of one taste. Om Vaja Sapa Samaya Manupalaya Vaja Sapa Tenopa Tishtadrito Me Bawa Sutokayo Me Bawa Supokayo Me Bawa Anudato Me Bawa Soasiri Me Prayata Samvapana Sutsame Etam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan Sawatata Gata Vajama Me Matsa Vajipava Mahasamaya Sattva. Alright, so thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please let me know if you have any questions. Next week we will be at the library, so please join us there. And we go for coffee after meditation. So it's a nice little, morning um, on a Saturday. But if you can't make it there, we'll also be on YouTube Live. So check us out there too. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Have a great